Good morning, and a special welcome to friends and colleagues tuning in. For those who don't know me, my name is John Fardoulis from an Australian company called Mobility Robotics. Today, I'm going to talk about real-world breakthroughs that we have achieved in the field using small drone remote sensing in humanitarian mine action. The format of my presentation is going to cover the state of play regarding the use of small drones for remote sensing in humanitarian mine action, then cover some examples and have a closer look at some of the things that we did. And then really the focus is going to be the breakthrough in the use of small drones for thermal imaging over legacy minefields. I'll talk about next steps and also some tips for researchers at the end. The scale of small drone remote sensing is tiny in humanitarian mine action. Under 100 small drones would be currently deployed across a sector that employs more than 20,000 people and functions in over 50 countries. Not even 1/4 would be using drones to their full capabilities in terms of cartography and creating orthomosaics. It's not about the drones though. They're quite inexpensive and easy to find in the marketplace. It's more about training and creating competent teams who can independently work in the field to generate decision-making data. There's also a lot of hype around the use of drones, and a true way to scrutinize if those you're speaking to are credible is to ask them to show you their real minefield data, if they have any. Ask them, how many landmines have you actually found using your techniques? On the other hand, many research projects over the last few decades have lacked field validation, so it's hard for mine action staff to take such research seriously. Setting up a sandpit on campus is easy. Reaching a minefield is difficult. Also in mine action, the term field means minefield, not a groomed sporting field on campus thousands of kilometres away. Mine action is a risk-averse sector and also involves sovereign nations. So many different levels of engagement and partnership and justification are required. Just in country, there's at least 4 levels from national, regional and local authorities, plus other stakeholders. Also, field operational personnel, those working at the pointy end, need to gain confidence in the work that's taking place, plus head officers and donors. And now it's time to look at what we did during a project called Odyssey 2025, a project that took place over real minefields in the central North African country of Chad. It was a project between the NGO Humanity and Inclusion and my company under the auspices of the High Commission for Demining in Chad, the HCND, funded by the Belgian Department of Foreign Affairs and the European Commission. The following is a summary of small drone remote sensing specific work packages that we delivered to give you an idea about how comprehensive the project was. Firstly, we prototyped and field validated techniques using small drone visual imagery. Many embedded field trials took place where the multidisciplinary approach between drone specialists and demining EOD specialists took place simultaneously in the field. We also created a context-specific humanitarian mine action ground sign indicator library, which visually describes what we're looking for in the field. We also captured more than 50 linear kilometres of visual imagery. This would be by far the greatest amount captured in the sector. We also implemented a capacity building campaign. So it wasn't just about expats running around the desert in the Sahara. There were 2 formal diploma levels of small drone training delivered to Chadian national staff to provide capacity creation so they could follow on with work in the future. One of the main things I'm going to concentrate today in following slides is breakthroughs in using small drones for thermal imaging. And it wasn't just a prototype or a proof of concept approach. More than 2,000 legacy landmines were found in situ in the field. We also designed, prototyped and field validated a static field laboratory to determine if thermal imaging is viable at each individual location. This was actually set up where we camped inside 30 kilometres of active minefields. Also, our project acted as a catalyst through evidence-based field work to help install confidence in the mine action sector regarding the value added by small drones. And our work has been scrutinised and peer-reviewed at every level, even to the point of winning a €1 million Horizon 2020 award from the European Commission. And now I'm going to focus and show detailed examples of how we used thermal imaging from small drones to find buried landmines. What you see on screen is an actual thermal image taken from the field from a small drone, which shows how different signatures are emitted from anomalies, indicating whether landmines are buried, partially buried, or on the surface. Here's another example on screen from 30-year-old legacy minefields. There are 2 AntiPersonnel mine rows with 9 anomalies on the screen. A slightly different colour palette has been used in this example, but once you understand what you're looking for, the anomalies are quite clear and don't really require extra processing. The flying height of the small drone can be adjusted to match the strength of anomalies, or you can fly it lower and achieve greater resolution. This video provides an example of a scouting technique used. What we're doing here is flying along the anomalies in real time, like following breadcrumbs. And what we could do in this example is fly for kilometres upon kilometres upon kilometres, and the GPS trail then can be imported into GIS or other software to log the location of where the landmines exist. This is quite a fast and efficient way of actually identifying the borders of where the mine rows exist, and you can fly at a height that's comfortable to be able to see these anomalies on screen and just follow them by flying the drone in real time along these anomalies. Once again, you can see that there isn't any post-processing required. When flying at the right time, anomalies can be as clear as this. This is a screen grab of what is on the display when flying the drone, showing the live video feed and telemetry. In this case, the height was 30.5 meters above ground level. These examples are all showing anomalies from buried landmines. This is an example now showing the difference in resolution by flying higher. So showing the relationship between height and resolution. We only saw 1 buried landmine in the beginning. Now we can see 3 on screen. Because generally, as you fly higher, you gain more efficiency and you have a bigger footprint, but it can be at the trade-off of resolution. This is from a height of 10 meters now. We can see 3 anomalies. And they're each from PMA3 AntiPersonnel landmines. As we ascend higher, a second row is now visible at the bottom of the screen, where we can see 7 anomalies now on screen. at a height of 16 meters. Ascending even higher, we can see more anomalies. And now at the top of the screen and the bottom of the screen, 2 more mine rows are visible. What you can see, and it's good to take note of the difference in anomalies between the anti-personnel landmines and the anti-tank landmines. The anti-tank landmines are at the top and bottom, with the anti-personnel landmines in the middle. The difference in physical characteristics is creating larger anomalies from the anti-tank mines than the anti-personnel mines. So what we have now on screen is we actually have 4 mine rows in the footprint that the camera can see. And from personal experience, I've been able to fly along these top and bottom larger anomalies, and we can assume that we have 2 rows in the middle because we know the pattern and we've captured other data at a lower height. One of the lessons learned was that flying at night was much better than during daylight hours. Anomalies were much stronger at night, particularly nights when there wasn't very much wind. What you see on the screen is the applied use of such a technique. Flying at an altitude to keep the top and bottom mine rows in the frame, we're following the anomalies like dots, like breadcrumbs along the way to show the perimeter and the borders of where the minefield exists. The main point here isn't to find every single mine, but to find the edges. Sped up as the video has gotten faster now, you can see that it's possible to find hundreds of landmines per flight. This is how we've identified the location of thousands of buried landmines in the real world. The main productivity gain is landing ground assets directly over where landmines exist as a starting point. Ground assets such as human, mechanical, and animal assets. That way, if we land them initially over where the landmines are present, they can work from the inside outward. Then technical field staff can determine what level of buffer or fade out to add beyond where they're finding the landmines to set as the perimeter of the work area. Such targeted technical survey or clearance could save millions of dollars in some countries and speed up the process by years. This diagram helps to explain the inside-outward concept a bit better. If you look in the middle of the screen, there's a red line. That's a GPS trail from the landmines located in the previous video. In this case, the mine rows spanned across an area of 650 meters long by 40 meters wide. That means an area of about 26,000 square meters. The problem in mine action is not knowing where the landmines are actually located in advance. So because of the need for safety, systematic blind searches are undertaken by ground assets, which might mean needing to cover an area as much as 1 million square meters to be able to find the hotspot, that 26,000 square meters of where the contamination existed. If we can help better pinpoint where to start ground operations, where to send our ground assets directly over the landmines as a starting point and working outwards, we can save a lot of time and a lot of resources. There is no generic landmine or generic minefield. Each landmine design can emit a different anomaly. Also, local conditions play a major role in the strength of anomalies and when they appear. What you see on the left of the screen is one of the PMA3 anti-personnel mines that have been excavated to validate our anomalies, and on the right there is a anti-tank mine that you saw in the data that also validated that kind of anomaly. It was important to prove completely that the anomalies captured by the drone actually represented buried landmines. So what you see on the screen is one of the AntiPersonnel landmines, an example of how our deminers excavated where anomalies existed to prove the anomaly was actually coming from buried landmines. Our project is the only one in the world that has identified from small drone thermal cameras thousands of landmines and had complete validation through deminers excavating anomalies to prove that we were actually finding buried landmines. A false alarm rate was not an issue in the environment where we operated. What was one of the main priorities is to capture clean sensor data when anomalies are the clearest. That means understanding when to fly and predicting the best operating times for optimal data quality. We also found discrepancies between theory and reality. This means that researchers really need to work with real-world minefield data rather than only relying on campus experiments. Also, putting the thermal anomaly capture into context, it's an NTS tool, a tool to gain better productivity from technical survey and clearance assets. It is not a substitute for demining, so missing some mines is acceptable. The main point is to target where to better deploy ground assets and start from directly over landmines and work outward. Then the ground assets will find every single landmine and deal with it. It was pleasing to find that local staff had the aptitude to analyse data. Capacity can be created for data analysis in only a few days with the right training programs. Some people jump immediately to steps like deep learning and artificial intelligence, but this proves that human intelligence is also quite viable, particularly from people who are dealing with contamination in their own backyard, understanding the context better than any other person or machine. And now for next steps. One of the most important next steps is to deploy our static field laboratories to many different countries and regions, because the viability of thermal imaging will depend on natural conditions and environments, and also be affected by the landmine designs or models found in each place. So specific tests need to happen in each location to determine if the technique is viable. This should be done before worrying about permissions for flying drones and logistics for flying drones, because first of all, an idea of whether the technique is viable is necessary, and because of such importance, it would be good to start a new project to send dozens of these test laboratories to different places around the world. Just getting one of the variables wrong could mean that the concept is untenable. That's why we set up our mobile field laboratory within 10 kilometers of the perimeter of real minefields in the Sahara Desert. Here's an example of the data captured by the static field laboratory that we set up inside the perimeter of a minefield, which includes burying different landmines at different depths, which gives an idea of how the intensity changes by depth. One of the main advantages of the laboratory is that it does capture data 24 hours a day, covering the diurnal cycle of a 24-hour period, so it can prescribe the optimal time of when to fly the drone, which in our case was at night, and also helps to understand the influence of wind and other environmental variables. Now that we've established a strong track record in working in a desert environment, we'll be expanding to use drones in other environments such as urban, vegetated, and in other countries to develop other methodologies, perhaps even using different sensors to help gain value in HMA operations. And now, tips for researchers and mine action operators. For more technical information, have a look at the current edition of the Journal of Conventional Weapons Destruction, where a lot more data is presented. And while speaking about the journal, it's a valuable resource that should be a starting point for any literature review. The journal is quite unique as it reaches more than just academics, field operators, EOD techs, a real wide cross-section of HMA practitioners contribute and read the publication. So it's a valuable resource to know what's going on in mine action. The current edition of the journal also contains an editorial piece where over 50 articles on thermal imaging in mine action have been reviewed from over the last 30 years. A distinct trend became apparent where research has been duplicated without a progression into the field. The table on screen shows examples of levels of proof associated with different steps along research pathways. You can see that outdoor campus laboratory trials are not even halfway along the path to field deployment at scale. In order to make a difference in the world, we need an evidence-based approach that reaches the pointy end of humanitarian field operations. To truly innovate, it requires a combination of better processes and the applied use of technology for improved methods. And innovation should always be people-centric. Thank you for your time. If you'd like to do some further reading, details of my website are provided on screen for links to HMA peer-reviewed journal articles, videos, and sample data. And now it's time for questions.